change in my voice. First of all, I made a minor mistake in one of these other videos. It was Isaiah 5 and not Isaiah 9, where it talks about how God is exalted and known, what have you. But I got the Psalm 9 part right. So this video is about the fact that other people don't understand God or God's power. Now, no one truly understands it completely but God. But other people don't know what they're talking about. Compared to me, they just are out of touch. So it says in Matthew 22 that people don't understand the power of Scripture. Now, is the power of Scripture in a feeling? No. Is it in mere speech? No. We see that in 1 Corinthians, that it says the kingdom of heaven is not a matter of mere talk, it's a matter of power. Now, what kind of power? We see in Exodus 15:3 that the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. We see in Revelation 22, Christ is a character in the story, says that he's the root and offspring of David. And this overkills that I'm Christ, right? When people want to argue with me about whether or not I'm Christ, they're quiet on that issue. They are scared of Revelation 22. Okay, what does it mean to be the root and offspring of David? We've seen, I believe it's the New Living Translation, it says also the heir to his throne. And after my flesh dies, there will be no heir. We know for many reasons. One reason we know is Psalm 89, which helps you understand what it means to be the root and offspring of David. Psalm 89 is the Psalm of David, and it talks about how God set David apart and anointed him. He set him apart and he gave him strength because he's a warrior, because God's a warrior, because he's a certain type of warrior. That's the argument being made here. And again, it's superimposed because we know that they're not going into detail about what kind of warrior David is. In 1st and 2nd Samuel, you get some kind of information. There's some kind of information elsewhere in the Bible, but it's not complete. Okay, Christ came to bring a sword, not a sling. And the difference in spiritual application between a sword and a sling is enormous. Okay, a sling is more for like children. And to this day, there's still children who buy slingshots. It's more associated with children, right? Baby lion. When you grow up, you get a sword. Now, and this is naturally and historically, not modern warfare, right? It's natural and supernatural. So in Psalm 89 it also points out that the foundation of God's throne is righteousness and justice. So it's a morally precise martial art order. Martial is marital scramble, and I, Christ, and the bridegroom. Because the people who made the language weren't the only ones who put together that martial arts go beyond mere Roman hand-to-hand combat, modern-day hand-to-hand combat, what have you. And that morally precise martial arts go beyond mere martial art theories or, secular martial arts, national-based martial arts, what have you. And I'm the only one who's morally precise. Everyone else should cheat me out of my right to lead. I'm the top martial artist. Okay, proof, pro of what? Just martial arts by itself? That word is kind of subjective. Pro of being the top martial artist, the way, the truth, and the life, the way, the one way. So we see that because of Amos 9:7, it makes it clear that out of Egypt, like it says in the Old Testament, out of Egypt I called my son, out of Egypt. It doesn't say out of, Chaldea or the Middle East. It says out of Egypt. And then Amos 9:7 says, are you not the same to me as same as the Cushites unto me, O children of Israel? Did I not bring Israel out of Egypt, where also the Cushites were in Egypt? So they, when you look at it, in a sense, the Cushites, certain Cushites are like Abel, and Israelites are like Cain. Now, why is that? Well, the Cushites remained in Africa, right? They remained in this kind of pressure cooker, where the Israelites left Africa. Now, in the story, God calls them out of Africa, splits the Red Sea, and so on and so forth. That's the story. But remember, the story's written by people who call good evil and evil good. Now, when you start thinking about this, you say, well, that's like what the devil would say, right? Well, you got to look at the works here. where in the Bible does it say that God said, I want you to write this Bible? You know, that is just kind of assumed, right? So there's these prophets, they're having visions and they're explaining things. They say, I saw this, this, and this, right? But where does it say, write this down and make a Torah? Write this down and make, one big Bible out of it. It's nowhere there. What is there, right? It talks about the 10 Commandments. It talks about morals, right? Proverbs, morals. And we see that Proverbs is written in a way that's a riddle. So when you see in Proverbs 1, it says that Proverbs is to understand the riddles, the parables, and sayings of the wise. You see Jesus speaking in parables. You say, well, why is there this parable in this book that Jesus himself didn't write in, according to the authors of the book themselves? And none of these books are attributed to Jesus. According to the churches, the authors, you name it. Now, who did compile the book? It was, these people who had survived because they were yoked to the state, who called for, a meeting of the bishops around the world, for various councils, including the Council of Nicaea. These are the people who compiled this book together, okay? And they decided what they felt was authentic and what wasn't. And so it is with the Torah. Who wrote the Torah? Was it Isaiah? Was it Moses? Now, some people say it was Moses, but if you think about it, it doesn't make sense. Moses died, right? Moses wasn't cited as a scribe, but he died without ever coming into the promised land. So even if Moses wrote the book, is that valid? Not necessarily, because God found him insufficient, so he didn't let him enter the promised land. Isaiah, in popular culture, was sodden too, right? These guys were persecuted, and there was a bunch of guys throwing their weight around saying, we don't believe you. And those are the guys who determined what books went into the Old Testament. Okay, and they broke it into various groupings of books, the Torah, etc. Then those writings, further writings, there's the Talmud, and there's the Zohar, and there's the Kabbalah. And as we look at these books, and we're like, whoa, some of this stuff is just clearly wrong. So or it's so encoded that it's disgusting. It's like saying something that's flat out wrong and saying, well, there's a code in there. And so it is in, the Old Testament, in Proverbs, which makes it crystal clear to us that you have to think deeply about what the story is telling. And furthermore, Hebrew is an Afro-Asiatic language. And Africans tell stories that have hidden meaning, very hidden meaning stories. Okay? And sometimes people say, well, that's what you got from it. Well, there's another way to look at it is this. They say things like this, and this is something that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years. So, are the Jews who are said to be evil throughout this story the center of the story? No, we see that in the New Testament, right? Galatians 3:28, there's neither Jew nor Gentile. So then, who has the works of God, right? Who has a kind of monotheistic way about them? It's certain black people are the closest thing to it in popular culture. Okay, as we look around, we say, okay, what is the evidence? What are the facts here? We have a Martin Luther King Day. That by itself, so what? All kinds of people who are evil have been given days. We say it's the details of the person that show us that he's closer to the idea that we're looking for that's coded in the story. And that eventually leads you to me. If you know who I am, if you understand the martial art argument, the Lord is a warrior. So who's likely to be loyal to God? I pointed this out years and years ago. I pointed this out maybe 13, 14 years ago when I first started making videos. I started making videos 16 years ago. So around the time I first started making videos, I said, what type of person responds correctly to the order of picking up your cross and following me and being willing to die at the drop of a hat? So what type of person? Is it the average craftsman? No. They're scared. They're scared of their own shadow. Is it the type of person who jumps into the water to save their own kid? Not necessarily, because many people will risk their lives for their kids, but they won't risk their lives for something noble, and they're not necessarily religious. Okay? Is it the type of person who's like a Shaolin monk who does these extreme exercises and, what have you? No, because they're not even monotheistic, right? And they just fall, they're the same race quite often as the people who are teaching Buddhism in their area, at the Shaolin temple, what have you. And they just said, hey, this is my culture. Hey, they're like me. They don't kind of transcend and masterfully find the point of life. Okay, it's the type of person like me who, when I looked at the Bible at first, back then I didn't quite believe the fact, I didn't quite know what to think about Jesus' race. And that didn't stop me from looking at the situation and saying the characteristics point more to somebody with heart like me, someone who's righteous. As a kid, I put that together. The type of person who obeys God is a certain type of romantic, monotheistic martial art, someone who has a certain profound sense of purpose and who has a certain discipline in heart. That's the root and offspring of David. And David is said to be a warrior king who rose to the occasion. When all the other Israelites fled, he stepped forward. So he's the type of person that not only accepts God's commands, but leads the charge because he's a warrior, like God, right? Made in the image of God, this warrior image of God. Genesis says man was made in God's image. Exodus says the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name. Now, do you believe the first guy who says, hey, I have a book here, and it says I'm chosen? No. Only a complete idiot would believe that. You're telling me when, say, you're born in North Carolina, right? And you look around and say, hey, this is a Christian community, and say you're a white person, I'm white, they're white, and hi, guys. That doesn't make sense. Now, it's not just because I'm mulatto and I look around and say everyone's different from me. No, that'd be stupid. It's because it's obvious that when you look around and you see a bunch of very simple-minded people following a crowd, following a book, and females aren't dating with a fair scale, all the way to the pinnacle of their spectrum, the most believable of them, their females aren't dating fairly. And God is love. You immediately say, what? Something's wrong here. Something is wrong here. Now, when I was younger, I saw myself as very unattractive. And I didn't think that it was quite wrong that they weren't attracted to me when I was, in fourth grade, whatever, because I felt at that time that I was unattractive. But I looked at exactly how they were dating and why, and I said, yes, something is very wrong here. I looked at the unwillingness to die for God and how people were so shallow. I said, something's very wrong here. God looks for heart. Before I read that in Proverbs, I knew God weighs the heart. He weighs the character. He judges your deeds. I didn't really read the Bible till I was I didn't even start to read it all myself till I was maybe 14 years old or something. And I just flipped through it real quickly. But I had a more profound understanding of God's expectations, and I was living a more holy life in terms of having that divine passion. I was getting into mischief as a kid, yeah, but I had a certain divine passion to do what was right. And so, when I look at the situation, it says the kingdom of heaven is not a matter of talk, like everyone out there is on the broad path, right? They're just merely talking. They're in some kind of fake, shallow, worldly Simpson spirit, and they're just merely talking. We see them, the Disney occult kind of theme of the world took over. Okay, the change of lighting, all these white light bulbs, the change of behavior, people acting like they're under mind control, the look in their eyes in the news, everyone seems to be under mind control in the news. Okay, people getting arrested for this. They're not all on drugs, and they're not all naturally mentally ill, so to speak. They're under some kind of mind control. There's a story for another day. If you withdraw that last argument there about mind control, you still get that I'm right. So I looked for the works, the fruits, the deeds. And I wasn't impressed by any religion. I was disgusted by the fact that like every racist person out there, they were quick to say, that's my race, I'm from this place, so that's my religion. And it was so pathetic to me. And I used to have conversations in my teens. I used to talk to females, say, look, Jesus never wrote in the Bible. And God never said, write a book for me and get this book out there. He said, preach the gospel. Okay, what's being said in the Bible is what it says, right? It was something that we can believe that God said, to go out there and tell the truth. Go out there and tell people to be good to the best of their ability because God is watching. That is something that we can expect God to have said. And so the moral failure of the churches, the mosques, the synagogues, and of every group out there, especially atheists and Satanists, when I was younger, and it's very similar today, were very a lot of them were poor and stupid. It's one thing to be poor. There's nothing wrong with being poor. It's more respectable to be poor than to be rich. But they were also stupid. They were clearly dumb. There are clearly people who are mad at Christians because things didn't go their way. And instead of saying, hey, there's a God or maybe or whatever, they were determined to either offend God as Satanists or to argue that magically what must exist magically doesn't, and that they were sure of it. No evidence, no scientific evidence in the slightest to point to the idea that they're sure of it. And then they would say to people, how do you know? Well, how do you know there isn't? And you also got to realize, one of the main proofs of the existence of God, incidentally, let's go over this real quickly, has to do with presence of mind. An ant doesn't understand that computers are real. They don't understand what a computer is. So it's brain capacity, brain power, brain presence. Here it is, an ant is around all kinds of things, and it doesn't understand very well what it is. You say, prove a car exists. Yes, something causes a vibration. Prove it's a car. Okay? When you have a higher brain capacity, more brain power, and more presence of mind, you say, that's a car. And obviously there's more than meets the eye to it. And so it is with God. See, what's going on here? Well, I sense God. And there's more to God than I understand, but I sense it more than the ant, and I sense God more than other people. Because I've honed my senses for generations in spirit, and my forefathers in flesh, and myself in my body as well, my body, soul, and spirit. The spirit in which it was given and the spirit in which it was received, a Royal African Falcon, morally precise martial arts spirit. Can the ant say to the human, hey, you're a life form, I'm a life form. You die, I die. So therefore, how can you say you know better about me, better than me about what a car is? That is a stupid argument. And it points right to the brain. Can you imagine? Now imagine you're saying to the top martial artist ever, the son of 2 doctors, his father's a brain surgeon who's living a much better life than you are, that you think the logical assumption is you're right about why you're here, and that he's wrong. No evidence to that effect whatsoever. With an abundance of evidence that I'm right. The odds of life itself. The nature of martial arts. The odds of martial arts existing. The odds of martial arts improving one's life. And on and on and on. The horns in nature, the teeth, the claws, all this variations of warfare showing that God is interested in warfare. Meteors, earthquakes, thunder, lightning, hurricanes, tornadoes, whirlpools, tsunamis, volcanoes. And these things have a divine and deep and powerful kind of presence. When when lightning strikes, in a sense, thunder strikes too. When a volcano erupts, a tornado has a certain deep way about it that inspires thinking if you're not shallow. And that's God's kind of way of communicating. He is deep, and he communicates in a way that is deep. The patterns in nature go deep. And if you're shallow, you miss it. If you're shallow enough, you're like just an ant-minded idiot. So the kingdom of heaven is not a matter of mere talk. It's a matter of spiritual power. And life itself, living a worthwhile life, is not a matter of just following the crowd. That's being a brain-dead ant-like idiot just following the crowd. It said, learn from the ants. This is what it says in Proverbs. Learn from the ants, you sluggard. You who are too lazy to scramble to find the meaning of life. You who don't know how to prioritize. There's many things you can learn from the patterns of nature, including the ants is part of why it says learn from the ants. And that's one of them. The ants are diligent, but they're also shallow and stupid. They're working hard, but doing what? And why are they limited to that? So when you look at the arguments, their side of the argument is laughable. It's like Pee Wee Herman saying, well, I have my theories and you have yours, and people should follow me. It's like, look, you are fucking Pee Wee Herman. I'm the top martial artist ever possible. The son of the most moral brain surgeon that ever lived. If they follow you and not me, I promise you they are fucking retarded.